Hello and welcome back. Today I'd like to talk to you about drama in Athens and what that has to do with the real-life events of the Peloponnesian War. So if we're talking about tragedy and we're talking about drama at Athens, there are a couple of things you need to know. One is that the institution of tragedy and drama in Athens actually sprang from a poetry competition called the City Dionysia, a festival that happened each spring in Athens for competitions involving choral odes and recitations of poetry, and it later came to involve drama. So what's drama as we come to know it today? Well, drama theater is when people are pretending to be someone else on stage. People who are actors, who work in the field of drama, often refer to themselves as thespians. There's a reason for this. They're referring back to the legendary founder of drama, this guy named Thespis. And Thespis, who had the innovation of not just making speeches, as Athenians were often prone to do, but actually acting like someone else on stage. He pretended to be someone else as chorus sang and danced in front of him. And through this, we get a second actor coming on stage and people interacting with each other, and we have theater the way you think of it today. Let's talk more about this. Their plays were performed in theaters cut into the sides of hills, like this one in Segesta, Sicily. And the most famous one is probably this one here at Epidavros in Greece. The theater at Epidavros, which was actually attached to a temple of Asclepius, seats 15,000 and has what I would describe as nearly perfect acoustics. Here's your teacher standing in the center of the orchestra, and you can see how far it is from here to the top. Standing at the center of the orchestra there, like this guy, you can have a normal conversation with the person at the top without raising your voice. In fact, if you're standing at the center of the orchestra pit here, you can jiggle your keys and the people at the top can hear it perfectly without even thinking about it. Tragic actors often wore masks, and there are all kinds of theories about why they did this. The main reasoning, though, is that by wearing a mask with exaggerated features, the people in the back row could tell who you were when you were on stage immediately without thinking too hard about it. And here's actually a sculpture of a tragic actor with this exaggerated style of mask on. When we think about tragedy, our best working definition comes to us from a guy named Aristotle, who was writing a bit later. He defines in his Poetics tragedy as an imitation of a noble and complete action, having the proper magnitude. It employs language that has been artistically enhanced. It is presented in dramatic, not narrative form, and achieves, through the representation of pitiable and fearful incidents, the catharsis of such incidents. Well, what does that mean? It means this. It means that in order for something to be tragedy, it must tell a complete story. It must be serious. It uses fancy poetic language. It shows the action rather than telling of it. Scary stuff must happen so that the audience will feel catharsis or release when all the craziness that happens on stage is over. We'll talk more about catharsis in a minute. What else does a tragedy need to have? A tragedy needs to have a hero, and the Greek word for hero is heros. And this isn't necessarily someone who does nice things, like Spider-Man. A hero is someone who has divine blood or divine ancestry. So that may be a person who's very nice or a person who's not so nice at all. This hero will often commit hubris. And what do I mean when I say hubris? I don't mean arrogance. I don't mean pride. I mean acting in a way that demeans someone else, not for your own benefit, but because it makes you feel good. Hubris is the act of a bully. Because of the kind of hubristic actions that the hero commits, he will often commit hamartia, and that is a missing of the mark. Some teachers define hamartia as someone's character flaw. In reality, though, it's just a miscalculation on the part of the hero. He's trying to do the right thing, but screws it up instead. As a result of the hamartia, peripetia will occur. And this is a crisis or reversal of fortune, always in a negative direction. And it occurs as a result of a chain of events. Because the peripetia happens, because the bad thing happens, the main character usually gains something called gnosis. Gnosis is self-knowledge, or an awareness of the way things really are. We, in the audience, hopefully gain catharsis. And this is a result of the action taking place on stage. And we feel such feelings of pity or extreme terror that catharsis is the release of these emotions. And the best analog I can give for this in modern pop culture is in the horror film. all the bad things have happened that can possibly happen, and the credits start rolling, and you know the movie's over. When that happens, you often sigh, because you know it's over. That's catharsis. That's a release that you get. And in ways, except for all the singing and dancing, Greek tragedy is a lot like a horror film, in that really horrible stuff happens on stage. Some of the greatest writers of this period wrote tragedy. The first of these is Aeschylus, who lived from 525 to 456 BCE. He's most concerned with issues of the state and religion, and use really brainy intellectual language. Think of him as the Shakespeare of his day, because he actually invented many, many Greek words just for use in his own plays. Another famous playwright from this period is Euripides. He wrote from 485 to 406 BCE. And Euripides is intriguing for us because he does a few things that hadn't been done before. He portrays strong women on his stage. They're often less than flattering portrayals of male heroes from ancient myth. If you've read his Medea, you know that his portrayal of Jason is less than nice. Jason's kind of a jerk. He spends a good deal of time focusing on the thoughts and motivations of his characters. His language is also quite simple, and he uses special effects on stage like the Deus Ex Machina, which is where a character would fly onto stage or off by use of a crane that was off stage. Now I'd like to talk about Sophocles, who lived from 496 to 406 BCE, and he's the author of such plays as Oedipus the King and Antigone. Sophocles is important to us because he introduces the third actor to the stage in Greek drama. He also kind of downplays the importance of the chorus. These are these singers and dancers who performed off stage in the orchestra, this part right here. Aristotle actually credits him with the introduction of scenographia, or the art of scenery painting. So he actually really does a lot for backdrops on stage. Sophocles sort of splits the middle between Aeschylus and Euripides. He's writing with language that's definitely artistically enhanced. It's definitely not simple. But at the same time, it could be understood by his audience. Sophocles, like both of the other playwrights I just mentioned, is also really concerned with issues of religion and state, and where the individual fits into all that. Which gets me into his Oedipus the King play and what that has to do with the Peloponnesian War. So, I'll tell you a bit about Oedipus the King. Some of you have heard the story before. It's about a man who goes in search of his parents. Along the way, kills the Sphinx, liberating the city of Thebes from a horrible plague, marries his mother, and kills his father. At the start of the play, Oedipus the King, there's a horrible plague overtaking Thebes. People are dying, babies are being born dead, all kinds of awful things are happening. And people look to their king, Oedipus, to cure the city of this plague. Oedipus, at every single turn, acts arrogantly, and in search of the truth, he hurts those around him. And at the end of the play, he leaves the city of Thebes mangled and disfigured with a dead family. This play, written by Sophocles, may be interpreted as a critique of the Peloponnesian War. This war broke out in 431 because Pericles convinced the people of Athens that the way forward for them, the way to get wealthier for them, was to engage in war with Sparta. I'm oversimplifying here, but the people of Athens and all citizens had a vote, were convinced into going to war. The very following year, a plague broke out because when the Spartans made a land invasion of Athens, the people of Athens had to withdraw behind their land walls, which ran from the city of Athens and its Acropolis all the way down to the port of Piraeus. Suddenly, the city of Athens' population increased by many tens of thousands. This overwhelmed the sewer system and brought about plague. How bad was this plague? Well, it included things like throat and tongue becoming bloody, sneezing and hoarseness, hard cough, ineffectual retching, diarrhea, violent ulceration, and death. This plague would eventually kill Pericles, the man who convinced the Athenians to go to war in the first place. Oedipus the King was at first performed in 429 BCE. For this reason, many people view it as a critique of Peloponnesian War and the way Pericles convinced people to go to war, thus bringing about plague. Now, why would he choose to do this? Why couldn't he just write a play called Pericles the Jerk? The reason for this is there was a societal taboo in Athens concerning referring to modern political events in a tragedy. It was seen as too personal, it was seen as too political. So authors like Sophocles would frequently refer back to some mythological incident in the past. The events that take place in Oedipus the King take place 500 or 600 years before the time the playwright was even living. So he couldn't have been talking about Pericles, could he? Well, he probably was, but he was just doing it in a very veiled kind of way. Stay tuned for my next lecture on the intellectual trends of Athens during its golden age.